welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Hello, and welcome back to another Paperback Flicks. I'm Ruth Craddock. I'm here with my lovely co-host,
Rae Davidson.
And today we're talking about the book Divergent, along with the 2014 film starring Shailene Woodley and Theo James, amongst other people. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So, Rae, what did you think of the book?
I'm actually really glad that I read the book. I watched the movie when it was probably not in theaters. I feel like I probably waited until it was on Blu-ray or something. Because that was in my baby days. It was one of the movies that I was like, you see the ads for it and you're like, oh yeah, I want to see that. And then when I did see it, I was like, oh, okay. And I feel like I probably saw the others, the second and third. Like I feel like there was more movie than the first book, so I feel like I saw more.
You probably did. It must not have left a very big impression. I
don't remember stuff, but yeah. But I am very glad that I read the book. So I feel like the movie took all of the humanizing elements out of the story.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, the movie was fine for what it was, you know? And then after reading the book, I'm like, oh, suddenly everything matters more to me. Her relationship with Four matters more and is more. Because in the movie, it's like, oh, look, the star of the show and the hot guy. Of course they end up together. Like,
of course. Who else?
Yeah. It felt very maybe two-dimensional. I don't know how else to explain that.
The perfect way to explain it right there.
Yeah.
Two-dimensional.
So,
and that's like a film medium, which is three-dimensional, but the two-dimensional book was more three-dimensional than the three-dimensional film. So
yeah, well, I feel like I got a deeper sense of everything. The abnegation, the concept of truly like giving up yourself. The action, like the concept of that girl going into Dauntless, just how devastating that was to her processing through that. The love story element, where she's like, that's not like, for a while she can't even admit that she is even attracted because that's a selfish thing, and
she
can't let herself do that, you know, like it matters more when she's finally like, yep, I like him, like I'm gonna just own this. It matters more to me.
Definitely. Did you have a favorite part of the book or least favorite part?
I liked the simulations in the book. I really liked the description, the kind of dream state feeling that you get when you read them. Those were really cool, especially going through Fours when Ford takes her into his fearscape. I really liked that.
I feel like it was really well done in both the book and the movie. So I feel like I wasn't disappointed for the most part in how they carried that over into the film. One of the things that really bothers me about the movie that I loved about the book was the character Tris herself. Like, I feel like she was relatable to me because apparently I have a firm belief that writers write characters a certain way, even their physical appearances and their ethnicity and whatnot, for a reason. They didn't just randomly choose. You're like, I'm just going to pull this out here. She's going to be black, but she's going to be like diabetic. And then she's got like, she likes kung fu, but she hates pasta. And like, I mean, you're not going to have all this random things they're just pulling out of a hat. They have a reason why they put all these things together to build this character. And sometimes for writers will say that the character's, you know, writing itself, like this is a person who's actually there. They're not choosing, they just are. And one of the things that why I related so much to this character was because she was a small girl. She was short like us. She wasn't a tall person. So there's a thing people may or may not realize. When you're tiny, lots of physical activities are really difficult automatically, like in a way that an average sized person wouldn't understand, or a tall person. And here's the thing, Shailene Woodley is not short. She's not even average height. She's like above average. She's like 5'7". Okay. So you go from somebody that, from what I understood from reading the book, she was described as being like 5'1", 5'2". And I'm like, there you go. I totally relate right away to this character. She's a small person. And not just that, but because of her being in abnegation. So I love that all the names of the factions are almost impossible to say, because that's a true like dystopian fantasy like form right there. We got to make it hard for people to say it.
Yeah, I actually, the erudite, when I was reading it, I'm like, erudite, yeah.
Yeah, I think I did read the books before the movies came out. The whole thing about her being part of abnegation, it's sort of, I felt a parallel sort of to my own religious background, and where, you know, growing up in Utah, which is part of my religious culture. And there's a sense that everyone's expected, it's not what's expected, but there's kind of like an underlined notion that everyone's expected to act the same and be the same. And you have to fit into this mold, and we all have to do the same thing. And it's not at all what's taught in our culture, really, but it's just kind of like this unspoken thing. And so I related on that sense, because I felt like in a way I got that, because I feel like in a lot of ways our religion is like abnegation. So in some ways I related to that. I also related to the fact that she didn't feel like she belonged there, and I never really felt like I belonged because I never fit in. I got that, being like a part of something and respecting the culture that you grew up in and that you were raised in, but kind of feeling like you don't quite fit in and don't belong. So I related to her on that sense. I related to her on the sense that she was this tiny person who secretly wanted to be this tough person and wanted to do all these tough, dangerous things. And then for someone like that to decide to choose to be dauntless, it's going to be 10 times harder for her to do everything than the average person. Even that first jump off the train to their like building whatever, a little person, they don't have legs. You got to like really like just jump and go for it and hope that you don't fall and die, because
little steps for everyone else. Yeah,
you have to like twice as many steps and twice as much effort. Whereas tall people, like I'm married to a tall person, you are too, so I'm sure you understand the tall short person dynamic and how much they don't understand about being tiny.
Well, everything is different. Like that's kind of something that Scott and I have actually, like, I will be like, oh, this is driving me crazy, like when it comes to cleaning or whatever, and Scott will actually like do the thing where he goes like this. He's like, okay, girls, she wants you to pick up this. And then I'm like, because 2 of my 4 children are taller than me. And the other 2 are like here and here.
We're getting there.
So yeah.
Catching you up.
Yeah, I actually have two expectations for my children in life. I expect them to outlive me, and I expect them to outgrow me. So far, so good.
You know, you're not too demanding as a mom. I mean, that should be easy to like.
I feel like they'll all make it, because these 2 are like 10 and 8. So
okay. Yeah.
So they've got some time. Yeah.
Yeah. I have one kid taller than me right now, and the other ones are like kind of making their way. So we'll see. Of course, I am tiny, and their dad's 6'2". So it's like,
that's us too. I'm 4'11". He's 6'2". So
there you go. So it's like, it's sort of a coin toss. Wherever they land, that's where they land, and most likely they'll be somewhere in the middle. But anyway, so tall people don't understand the trial it is to be a small person and to be trying to, you feel like you're constantly having to prove that you can do things that everybody else can, because there's always somebody who's trying to be like, oh, let me do that for you, let me do this for you. And there's all sorts of things that tall people take for granted that a little person has to really struggle for. We have to like, we're problem solvers. We have to come up with different ways to do things. Like I'm in the grocery store, and of course 50% of the time the thing I need is on the very top shelf, just because grocery store people suck. And I don't know, but like they put it on the very top shelf. all the time. And so I literally have to climb the shelf like it's a ladder to get the thing I want. And then some people would stop and ask a stranger, hey, would you get that for me? Sort of the mindset that if you ask for help, it's like admitting that you're weak or you're not, like it's a flaw or something, like you're pathetic if you need help for anything. So I don't ask for help, and I have to force myself to ask my husband for help because I'm trying to let him be like my husband, and half the point of marrying somebody a foot or so taller than me is that he can get all the high stuff. I can ask him, but I'm not going to ask a stranger in a store. So it's just too weird. I'm sure people were giggling everywhere watching me climb this thing like I'm a mountain climber just to get this bottle of something. But yeah.
And I think I'm an Amity probably, because I'm the person that 100% you need to get something that's like on the bottom shelf in the back and be like, is there any more of these? I'm totally that person that's like, oh, let me see. And I will just like go for it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But by that same what?
You go find it for somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By that same token, like if I know Michelle Obama was talking about years ago, I think, how she was like so like kind of offended that she was in a grocery store and someone was like, oh, excuse me, can you get that for me? It's on the top shelf. I'm like, I would 100% do that, because also like I wouldn't go looking for someone that was taller. But if I'm like 4 feet away from someone who's clearly capable of reaching it, I would totally be like, I'm sorry, could I ask you to get this for me?
Yeah.
Because by that same token, if somebody else is looking at the bottom shelf going, oh, I don't know, there might be one back there, I'm totally like, I'll go see.
No problem. I'm already down here anyways. So
yeah. So
yeah, you're the help out kind of person. Yeah.
The one that they go, do you know where this is? And I'm like, I don't know. And I start looking at the other aisles to like see if I can figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Like, and I'm the kind of person, I will help other people, and I'm totally happy with helping other people. And someone asks me for help, I'll be like, yeah, sure. But I would rather die than ask for help. Like, I'm getting better at it. It's just something that I've had to like work on over time. And especially when I was younger, I was just too proud. I couldn't admit that I needed help because I feel like everybody was always putting me down for being small, or always had to be like, oh, you're so little. And they had to like rest their arm on my head, and they had to just randomly pick me up and twirl me around. Like, these are men I just met, guys I just met, and they just had to pick me up and twirl me around because I was small. And I was like, what the heck is your problem?
Yeah. Ray ball was a thing. It's football, but it's with Ray.
You're the ball. You're like, oh, this is so much fun. Yay. I mean, I just feel like people were always like, oh, you can't do that. You're just small. You're just tiny, blah, blah, blah. You can do anything. You're just a little woman. So I get how, like, there was a point where I wanted to join the Navy, and I wanted to like prove that I was tough, that I could do these things. And I always felt like I was tougher and stronger than people gave me credit for. And I need to prove something. So I totally identified with that aspect of the character from the book, that she decides to do this thing, which is a huge challenge for her because she's not naturally an athletic person. She's not built to jump great heights or to do all these things. And she's not going to have a lot of muscle because she's a smaller person. So she's not naturally broad-shouldered and big and like just push her weight around. So this was, I feel like that made the stakes of what she was going through so much more just higher and more realistic and more relatable for me.
Right. And it's part of that relationship dynamic. It says in the book, I don't remember if it says it in the movie, but in the book, like it like points out, like, he always had faith in me. He always just assumed that I chose this, I will do it, you know? Uh-huh. I think that's what bothered me the most about the movie, taking away how I said it took away a lot of the relationship to me, because like even like when the knife throwing.
Yeah, it was Al that she took over the knife.
And yeah, she takes over the knife, and he before he throws it, he would do one of these things, and he would kind of taunt her, almost like being like, you know, you flinch even an eyelash. And he steps back in because he knew, or he had faith in the concept that sure, she's little and seemingly kind of weak and mousy, but I know that her abnegation mindset is not going to let Will take this. Like, she's going to take this for him. I know that if she just looks right here, she can steady herself enough. You just focus right here. I'm going to hug this. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're strong. You can do it. Like, and she talks about that in the book, that she has this moment where she's like, he never for an instant looked at me and said, oh, this poor little girl. Like, I need to be nice to her. Like, he was always just like, you chose this. Let's see it, you know?
Yeah.
And I loved that aspect. Like that, like when she says that, I'm like, they deserve to be in love now because
he respects her. She doesn't have to prove anything to her. He gets her as a person, you know. And so it's fun though, finding out that he is abnegation too, and finding out he's divergent too. You're like, oh well, you guys were totally meant for each other. You're very much alike. So yeah, that's one of the things that was hardest for me when they made the movie, when they cast somebody that clearly didn't fit what the author wrote. And don't get me wrong, Shailene Woodley is fine. I think she's a fine actress. I think she did a decent job. But what was really weird about it is that her best friend is supposed to be sort of the tough girl and like doesn't have a problem doing all this stuff, was Zoe Kravitz, who is 5'1", 5'2" in that era, who is the size the character should be, the lead character should be. So she's the tough one. I mean, okay, I don't want to seem like little girls can't be tough. They can. But like naturally, the bigger you are, the more muscle mass, the more power. So the fact that the little girl was naturally good at this, and she wasn't struggling at the bottom of the thing, but the tall girl was, who's got twice her height and twice her muscle mass.
Well, and it goes back to the whole dynamic that in the book, Christina does kind of become like, I'll be your protector. You're my, I'll take you under my wing, kind of and it's genuine and it's kind and it's friendship.
Yeah.
But also Tris has a bit of a hard time with it because she's like
I don't want that.
Oh, I can do it. Give me the chance to succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't really exist in the movie. I mean, it can, but
it's not really there. It's more of like they just decided to be friends because they were the last ones to jump off the train together and landed on the rooftop together. That's what it feels like in the movie.
That was another thing that I really liked about the book that I feel like the movie did not do justice, was that they have the choosing ceremony and then the dauntless all run out, right? And there's one kid that doesn't make it on the train automatically. He's factionless. Like she watches, because she kind of had this like feeling of like, I love their freedom. Like I love that they can just run around and do what they want and like look however they feel comfortable looking. And so that's kind of a lot of why she chooses dauntless, is that they feel so free where her life felt so constrained. And then she's like running and she's climbing the thing, whatever, and she gets onto the train and she's like, whew, and then she turns around and she watches a kid not make it and she's like, oh, this is real. And then they jump off the train and they see the girl fall to her death and she's like, good night. Like life just got real serious. Consequences just smashed you in the face. Where I feel like the movie was kind of like, well, she almost didn't make it, but of course she did, because the movie is about her. If she didn't make it, movie over.
Yeah, we know. We know she's going to. You're right. It is definitely more unforgiving in the book than it is the movie. I did always like that part. The kid not making the train was very poignant, kind of like, oh crap, so that's it. He doesn't get another chance to get on. That's it. He's done. And then of course the girl falling is just like, whoa, somebody just died. And they're just gonna move on like nothing happened, and we're just gonna continue going. It's too bad for her. She picked the wrong faction. I'm gonna say fraction at some point. But yeah, but like the only thing that really made it feel like it was more like high stakes is when they're like, okay, so even if they bust their butts and they're working hard. If they don't, they're not doing well enough, they can still be kicked out, which kind of makes sense. Because one of the things that was kind of funny, when I was watching it with my husband, he's like, wait, so they take this aptitude test that tells them where they belong, but they can still choose. So what if they're stupid and they choose to be an erudite? I mean, how's that gonna work? Right. But the fact that they still have training they have to go through and they've been initiated and then they have to make the cut, that makes more sense. So it's like you really want to choose the right faction or you're screwed.
Right.
Right.
Well, and it kind of alludes to, I think it's in the book, that it alludes to like amity and abnegation. I mean, if you choose us, you're in, we'll find something for you. And then it feels like in candor and smart people, erudite, yeah, whatever. But like they kind of have like almost like a ranking system, like the way that, like, it's not like delineated necessarily, but the concept that like you're here, that's fine. Are you a janitor or are you a biochemist? Like,
yeah.
You know, like they kind of have like by the end of your training, you'll have kind of a level that you belong in, you know. Whereas Dauntless is like, if you're not good enough, you're out. Like, frankly, it's funny that they have the Dauntless are the ones that are essentially policing the factionless. And I'm like, you know, most of them are probably Dauntless cast-offs. That probably makes up the majority of the factionless, so it makes sense that they would be policing them because they created a lot of them.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. That makes sense. I did find it funny how in the movie, every time they show the factionless, they're all kind of standing there staring at them. Like this just came out of a drug, like induced coma or something. And they're all just like, I'm like, okay, apparently that's what they think homeless people look like, or I don't know. It just seems like they didn't see, it felt staged. Like, oh, the camera's on you. You now have to look all despondent and like miserable, instead of like, you know, somebody just going about their lives trying to make it work, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I did, so doing all like reading the book, watching the movie for the first one, I was like, I feel like I saw more movie than this. And so I went ahead, I just recently just watched the second and the third movies, which there's a ton from there that I don't remember. So I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened a decade ago. But
you were having babies, you were a mommy brain, so it is what it is. Yes.
But in watching the others, because down the line, of course, factionless is essentially the unnamed faction. Like they kind of form their own faction.
Yeah.
Or anti-faction. That's what they are. They're the anti-faction, right? Yeah. And it kind of makes me, I don't know that the people making the movie thought this through in the beginning, but it feels like you could say, by watching the second and third especially, that the factionless in the first movie were perhaps like, oh crap, don't get caught. Like, oh, nothing. I'm a homeless man. Don't worry about it. You know, like
there's like, don't look suspicious. Just be like,
right. Hum.
What? Doing anything?
Oh, that was one thing I was going to mention, though. In the book, they specifically say that, like, the factionless were the ones that were the janitors and the bus drivers and whatever. Whereas in the movie, they're just straight up homeless people.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked that in this utopia, that even the factionless, even the rejects, had a purpose. It was just a limited, considered lesser life.
Yeah.
But they still had purpose, whereas in the movie they were just thrown away,
just extras hanging around, wandering about. Someone's like, just look, I don't know, look like you're a zombie but not. Or something. So yeah, what do you think of the casting of Theo James as 4?
So not what I would have expected. but I liked it. I didn't realize that I had seen him in other stuff. Like when I watched this and watched it again, I was like, do I know him from anything? And I looked up his stuff and I'm like, oh, I've seen a couple of these. But
like what?
But I don't remember now.
Forget I asked.
It's one of those things I'm like on IMDb and I'm like, oh,
okay. Yeah.
I think he was on a couple of TV shows where he's on like in like 4 episodes or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember now. But anyway, it was one of those things. I'm like, I appreciate that he's not the guy that you go, oh yeah, that guy that's in, like
I think he was like a lesser known guy. Yeah.
Yeah, like Jeff Goldblum. Like he's always Jeff Goldblum in whatever he is. And
yes, he is.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that was not a problem here, which I feel like I've said that before, but I appreciate when I can, especially when I'm watching a movie, like I want to just be sucked in. I want to be living in post-apocalyptical Chicago, experiencing this with everybody else, you know? And yes. I appreciate when the actors don't pull me out.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. I also liked, I wrote down his name, but I don't think I mentioned it before. Ansel.
The one that plays the brother.
Elgort. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Yes. But yeah. So I liked that he was not, because sometimes you end up with the impossibly beautiful people. We talked about that with the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. Yeah. That like everyone just seemed to be like flawlessly beautiful, you know? Yeah. And I liked that both Shailene Woodley, I don't remember.
Something to that effect. We're just gonna call her Shailene. We know that part's right.
So Shailene and Ansel had a real quality, like these were abnegation kids, you know, and he had kind of that like abnegation background, but he kind of looked like a nerd. Like I understand that he's actually apparently like a very like sought after young man. Okay. I say young man, he's like a decade younger than me, which feels young. So, yeah. but you know what I mean? Like I get it. In real life, he is this, you know, celebrity that is this attractive man or whatever. But in the movie, I believe it. That's Caleb. That's this like guy who learned selflessness from the womb and then was like, but I'm also really smart, so I'm gonna go hang out with the nerds now. Like, yeah, I see it, you know. And I like that. I like that everyone felt like they belonged, of the main cast at least. Yeah. With the exception of sometimes the aesthetic, like you were saying, like Shailene's too tall. Christina is actually smaller than Tris. That doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, I still like both those actresses. I think they did a fairly decent job of their parts. It just, from reading the book and how I had identified with the book, it was a disappointment to then watch it where they essentially just flipped the parts around. I mean, I think I would have been happier if they just made Zoe Kravitz Tris. That would have made more sense. Like honestly, and then make, you know, Shailene Woodley Christina. That would have made so much more sense, but they didn't, because Hollywood doesn't appreciate short people, and everyone makes a fuss about representation. Well, short women need representation too. We do.
Yeah, and that I kind of did like that. Shailene is not the like automatic beauty. She's a lovely woman, and she actually, I mean, just like all of us, we can be quite beautiful. But just the normal her, like she has the same thing that I have. It's not a true double chin, but it's like that like lax skin right there. Like I purposely like put my camera at an angle that doesn't usually show up. You know what I mean?
See it. Like I really have 6 chins, but you wouldn't know because that's all the camera's all the way up there.
And when I smile, I'm like, yeah. And she's got a little bit of that too, and you don't look at her and go, oh, you know, like no. She's still lovely, but she's the girl next door lovely.
Yeah.
And
I do appreciate that. Yes.
I really appreciated that. And for the guy that plays Fleur, he kind of has that like you don't initially look at him and go, oh man, like that's the guy. But then as you go along and you're watching the show, like especially once you've read the book and you know the emotion that's supposed to be behind it, the thought process that's supposed to be behind what he's doing.
Yes.
You kind of go, how do you not fall in love with Fleur? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And he does
I don't know.
very close to the description.
I think Theo James is quite hot and very brooding, and he does the brooding like tough. He's very good at that look and that expression, and like this, like I don't know so much if I would say that him and the character from the book are exactly the same, but I like his representation, like his version of Fleur so much that I'm like, it's okay. He works for me. He works really well for me. And I feel like
does he actually in real life have a British accent? I feel like that's a thing, but now I'm not confident.
There's some British actors, it seems like, are so good at the English, at the American English accent, that you'd be shocked to find out they're actually English.
Right. And I'm like, something else that I saw him in, I don't remember. I'm thinking it's like a period piece. I kind of want to like look it up really quick, but I won't. But okay, I did like kind of the casting all around. Janine was not what I expected. Who was that?
You mean the erudite lady?
Yeah, the leader of the erudites.
Yeah,
which the actress, because
Kate Winslet. Do you not like Kate Winslet as that character?
I don't know why I couldn't think of her name. I was trying to call her Rosa or.
Well, she plays as Rose in Titanic. So
my gosh, Rachel. That was just me being dumb, apparently. Just super dumb. But
sometimes people are just so good in their parts, or they're so iconic that they just become that person, and that's I mean, Johnny Depp stopped being Johnny Depp some time ago, and now he's Captain Jack. It just happens.
Right. But I didn't expect her. To me, that seemed so odd. Like I just didn't. I don't know.
How did you see her in your head? Who would you have cast if you were in charge of this casting?
I don't even know now. Like I had somebody that was kind of in mind, but now I
now that you're on the spot, you're not gonna remember it, right?
Well, also I'm trying to look up Theo James still to figure out what it is that I'm like, I know I saw him in something. Oh, he's Pamuk from Downton Abbey.
Oh, I've never seen it actually. I keep meaning to get around to it, but I haven't.
He's a pivotal character. He's not there for very long. His character is like there for like 1 or 2 episodes and then dies.
Well, great. Thanks. Gonna throw in that for everyone who hasn't seen that show yet, including me.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Spoilers.
Yes, say spoiler, then I go over my ears.
But yeah, so I saw him in that, and it's one of those where like I don't automatically go, oh, he's Pamuk, and whatever.
Yeah.
And but then once I made that connection, like I instantly saw it,
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't think of what I saw for Janine. I saw somebody that was perhaps more of like the older stereotypical scientist lady. Mm-hmm. Like, like Hollywood's version of like, I'm a scientist. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I saw.
I think she does fine as far as like being kind of like the very cold and logical and very sterile in her personality, but she's also there's a strong sense of manipulation, but at the same time you get a sense that she is not a warm person. Yeah, so I feel like she did a good job.
Oh, I feel like Kate Winslet is awesome. Like I wasn't disappointed in that casting.
She saw it differently.
It just wasn't what I expected.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem when you're writing a book. You can You can make them look however the flip you want. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. But then somebody has to go out and cast real people to be in the movie. And it's almost impossible to fit everyone's notion of what they saw in their head. Whereas I personally think I'm all for describing characters in detail and being like, this is what they are. This is what they look like. So you're not confused. This is it. And then other people, they're like, oh, well, I want to just leave it open to the reader to imagine it. And I'm like, okay, but it's your job to tell us who this person is. So I just feel like lazy writing to me. But to other people, it's like, they can just put whoever they want in their head. But in that case, it's like no one will know who should be the part. It's just whoever they cast and whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and when people like dream people up in their head, then you end up with people who get disappointed because the movie doesn't live up, the actor doesn't live up to what they had in their head. Whereas no one will, like, no one else knew that random reader over there, like, oh, she thought she would be blonde. Oh, recast, like.
Yes. Well, I think one of those things is, I think certain names, we get certain associations with certain names. So then we read it in a book and like we get in our head, it's a certain look or certain hair color or style or personality. And then later, so this is something I've noticed with a lot of books, is I'll already have it in my head how they look. And then eventually the author gets around to telling me that they're blonde. And I was like, oh, I thought they were brunette all this time. Now I've got to rework the image in my head. That's why I'm all for reminding people here and there, oh yeah, by the way, she has black hair, but in like a way it's not like, by the way, but kind of just put it in there. Because I kind of personally hate it as a reader to be like, wait a second, now I've got to reimagine this person all over again. And I have the same thing if I read the name wrong. So I have like a different notion in my head because I thought so I don't know if you ever read the Work in the Glory series. Gerald Lund. One of the only LDS fiction books I've ever read. But one of the main characters' name was Linda, and I had in my head that so it was Lydia, but I had it in my head that she was Linda. And then when I realized, I'm like, no, I've been reading this wrong. Like I've been putting the wrong name in there this whole time, even though like my brain just kind of just skipped over half the letters and decided that it's Linda. So I had her completely different in my head, and then I was like, wait, it's Lydia. And of course, we had a friend named Lydia, who was this cute little blonde girl.
Yeah.
Back when in your high, and I was like, well, that's not at all how I saw. This isn't Lydia. This is, anyways, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that it matters, but that's me. That's my fault for interpreting it that way, and we're all gonna do that.
Yeah, and like I said, I can't think of a cast member off the top of my head that I was disappointed that like, oh, they went with that one. Except like you said, like when they like, I'm not disappointed in Shailene.
She's good.
I kind of did have the same thing that you had to be like, well, okay,
of course,
the whole concept that she is just so little and so underestimated and undervalued, and Flora is the one that sees not just her potential, but just is like, okay, you made this choice, get cracking, like he's like, you want her to do this, let's go do this, like, he was the one that had that faith in her. And then she also, like, when he like goes to hug her or something, or she goes to hug him or whatever, and she's like, it was the first time that you feel that you're happy to feel small or something like that. Like,
yeah,
I know that as a 4'11", used to be 100-pound for a long time. I was
itsy person.
Yeah, I was teeny tiny in all the ways. And like, like in Aladdin, when he's like, the genie is like,
phenomenal cosmic powder.
Yep. I'm like, oh, that's
me. Cosmic power. Yes, you are. You're very powerful.
But yeah, the fact that she kind of didn't have that moment, like I understand that when you're in that situation, like you're like the girl that the boy you like is giving you a hug or whatever, we all have that moment where you're just like, I fit here. Like,
Yeah.
I get that. And she does still have that in the movie, but it's just not as poignant, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess it has to do with, identifying with the character and feeling like you get them on a certain level. So I'm sure it's not going to bother somebody who's an average height person isn't going to care that they change the character, and they're not going to get the whole how some, I don't normal people aren't going to get how irritating it is that some people will bend over to hug you like you're a midget. You're like, dude, just stand normal. I have no problem hugging your stomach. It's fine.
That's when people freak out, because I will go for the middle. I'll go for like just above your waist and just under your arm, and this is where I hug you. And people will be like, oh, because they're expecting me to, I'm the girl, so I go up around your neck. And I'm like, but I can't even reach your neck.
But you're also not, that's just like an intimate hug.
Right.
That's more like a, you're going to go and kiss them kind of a thing. Like that's you're my man.
Be like,
I'm going to hug your stomach. Yes, that's fine.
And she talks about that in the book where she's like holding on to his waist, which is that if we're both this height and I'm holding your waist, that says something very different from if I'm here and I'm holding your waist. That's a natural thing. That's where I would be hugging you. Like I think about like I said, I'm 4'11", Scott is 6'2". Well, 6'1" because he slouches.
Yeah, I understand. Johnny's 6'2", but he does slouch a lot, like a lot of tall guys do. So
when I go to hug him, like my elbow like goes like around the waistline, the small of the waist, like that's where I go, and then my hand usually comes up on his back, and that's how we'll like stand or whatever, taking pictures and whatever. Yeah. But that would have been perfectly natural for Tris to have done.
Yes.
When she is considerably taller and closer in height to 4, and she's holding him around the waist, and then she's like, let's take it slow. Like, let me just hold on to your hips and tell you to take it slow. Like that.
Okay.
That has a very mixed signal kind of feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was talking to one of my sisters about it, and because that's what I do. Like when I'm like, I'm going to be talking about this, I kind of want to hear what you think about it or whatever. And she was saying, I didn't read the book, but I watched the movie, and she's like, I don't know. She said that I said the same. I'm like, well, I feel like the relationship aspect and the concept of Tris overcoming all that she had against her. She had her own biology, her own size against her, right?
Yeah.
But that was so much more poignant in the book. And she's like, yeah, I thought it was weird that she's like, oh, hey, I want to go slow. And then they're like sleeping together. And I'm like, no, because in the movie, that's what they do. In the movie, they're sitting there and she's like, they kiss. And then she goes, let's take it slow. And then she's getting woken up by him. And we know, no, they don't actually like sleep together at that point. But it's not very clear in the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, like he's like I guess he does say like, I'll take the floor and you can take the bed, but then they have their whole intimate moment.
So that's where it changes things. Now you're like, you just assume he's just gonna be in the bed with her now. So.
Right. Whereas in the book, like she like rolls over and like watches him fall asleep on the floor or whatever. And then in the next morning, she like looks at the little spot he had on the floor and he was gone. And like she has that moment of like, wow, someone that I could trust like that. I didn't anticipate having that in my life,
Yeah.
Again, it's just, so what that thought was, to finish that thought, is that again, it just kind of lessened the relationship in the movie that I didn't like. One thing that I didn't realize was so prevalent, though, changing the subject slightly, there are scenes in the movie that do tell the story, but they don't exist in the book. Like when he says, hey, Tris, I want to show you something. And like they're watching the erudite people put in the
the supplies and the tracking things. Yeah.
Like I feel like that was not in the book. That I can remember, but I feel like there was a couple of those things that I'm like, wait a minute, that feels like they just made it up. Maybe they felt like they needed to tell the story a little more clearly, like visually.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of those things that I'm just like, huh. Or like how the mom in the book, the mom comes to Dauntless and she's like, tell your brother to look into the serum that they give for the testing things. And it feels like it's a lot more covert and not okay in the movie because she just like shows up where she's not. Mom just shows up where she's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And she's like, let me give you a couple of hints and sneak away, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? Why did Tris go see her brother? Because this doesn't make sense right now. You know what I mean?
Oh, it also felt like in the movie they made it seem like you weren't allowed to ever see your sibling again unless you were at some big public thing. So it was considered weird to go and visit your sibling who you grew up with all your life just because they're often a different faction now. I mean, that part was very strange.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm watching this movie with my husband, who's all he's not a conspiracy theorist per se, but he will point out anytime he sees something that looks like a subliminal message that's like trying to teach us this, or they're trying to shove this idea, they're trying to mess with us. Like, he's not crazy into it, but like, anyways, so of course he's watching this movie and he's like, so is this trying to like convert people to a communist lifestyle? Or I'm like, well, no, it's pretty much showing this is why this ideology doesn't work. They're talking about how individuality is the enemy, and it's like, no, that's the mentality of pure evil. Because individuality doesn't matter. We all become nameless and unimportant, and those that are up top can just be like, oh, well, it's what's best for everyone. So it doesn't matter if we kill this whole group of people, it'll make great for everybody else, you know? So anyways, it was just funny having him be like, that was interesting. That was an interesting line. Oh, yeah, well, that's very telling. And he kept saying that it felt very like relevant to today, and how you had to be this way or that way, and you couldn't be multiple things. And
even the concept of the faction before family, I feel like that is kind of relevant to today. And I feel like this story is a warning against that, because I know whether it's your religious denomination or your friend group, or like I'm a whatever, whether it's how you identify or what school you went to or whatever, like there is kind of that concept sometimes of faction before family, and
politics before family.
That's your faction, you know. And I feel like that is divisive. That is kind of the message, that is the message of this story, that the concept of faction before family dehumanizes a part of you and society. And I actually kind of wonder if this story gets told today. If they hadn't yet made the movies, would they right now? I don't know. I would like to think yes, but I kind of understand what he's saying, in that there's a lot of times that, like, I'll be like, I know our church has a tendency to say family first. You know, we have a lot of responsibilities. We call them callings, and they're temporary. Usually there are lifetime callings in the church, but a lot of the callings will be like right now, I have the 8 to 11-year-old girls. All of the 8 to 11-year-old girls in our congregation at church, I meet with them like in the afternoon every other week or whatever, you know, and we do different activities to kind of socially engage them, but also like based on like physical goals and spiritual goals and whatever, like,
you know, to strengthen them and help them become more confident in themselves. Yeah.
I used to be a den mother in the Cub Scouts, and just other things. I for years and years in several different places, I was working in the nurseries, so that while all the other moms and dads got to go to their Sunday school or whatever else, I was dealing with their snot-nosed toddlers.
Me too, but I also had a snot-nosed toddler in there, so that wouldn't have stayed in there if I hadn't been in there. So
all of my pregnancies and all of my new babies and all of my nursery kids, I was either in the youngest nursery group or the 3 and 4 year old group. Yeah. For every single pregnancy and baby. I was like, are you kidding me? I got a 2-month-old baby and you want me to watch your 18-month-old kid? But I did. And so but then our church will say family first, right? So if I go to the bishop, which I did a couple of times, and I say, I cannot be taking my 6-month-old baby into a bunch of 2-year-olds and try to take care of a dozen toddlers plus my own. I can't do it. Then they say, okay, for the needs of myself and my children, they would release me from that calling, right?
Find somebody else. Yeah.
Right. If I'm like, hey, I'm going on a family vacation, I'm not going to be here to do the activity with the girls or the Cub Scouts or whatever it was, then either somebody else would fill in for me, or if it was too much right now, I just can't do this right now. Okay, family comes first, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something that they actually push very hard in our church. And I feel like there are other groups that don't necessarily do that. I worked with the community theater a while ago, and I loved it. I love community theater. I love theater generally. Like, yeah, I was the drama geek in high school and junior high, and you know, and I loved it, except that, okay, my kid is sick. Do you want to be in this production or don't you? You know, and I kind of had to choose between family or this thing that I was good enough at that you let me be here, you know, this faction that I chose and you said, yes, you can be here, but now I have to give up my family for it. I felt like, you know, yeah. And so I feel like there is some of that in life right now, and sometimes it's chosen. Sometimes it's the person who becomes so obsessed with their work that they don't have time. Like you think of that Cats in the Cradle song. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about. And I love that song, and it makes me cry because Mommy Rae cries at like the slightest emotional thing. It's dumb. I'm waiting for that to pass, right? That's supposed to like pass on as my kids get older, and I don't do that anymore. But yeah, I see that when people will be like, I have to work, I have to do, you know, I don't want to let my boss down. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, your wife just
about your kids and
your kids miss dad. Your wife just went to another function by herself, mm-hmm. making excuses for why you can't be there. You know, or just didn't go. You know, mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I haven't done anything in 4 years because my husband has work, or the other way around. You know, oh well, my wife is a doctor and so she works crazy hours, so I stay home and I whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like mm-hmm. people get so obsessed with work that becomes their faction that comes before family. Yeah. And I felt like this story, the movie, and especially the book, were kind of a warning against that. That like Four says when he shows the tattoos, and it's dauntless because that's the family he chose. Mm-hmm. Abnegation because he doesn't want to let go of where he came from, mm-hmm. and then the candor, amity, and erudite, because he's like, because we should have balance. I
don't want to be just one thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to just say stuff because it's true. I'm going to have, you know, discretion is the better part of valor, you know. Sometimes I'm not going to tell the truth just because it is there to tell, but also I want to be an honest person. I'm not a scientist. I'm not devoted to, knowledge in my life. However, I want to be intelligent. Like, I want to do things intelligently. Like, that kind of attitude, I think, is what the story is trying to tell us from a couple of different perspectives.
Yeah.
And I don't know how excited Hollywood would be to tell that story today.
Yeah, it's true. Like, there's some books that, like, if they were published at a different time, they wouldn't have a chance. They wouldn't have been published, or they wouldn't have been very popular. And I think the same thing with some movies, that, like, they make more sense in the time that they're told. But also, I feel like it feels more like we're living in a dystopian time than it did in 2014. So, I mean, that was still fantasy, and it was fun for, like, crazy things that will never happen. And it was funny. Okay, so somewhat off topic. You know how we had the wonderful author we had on last time, R.K. Lee?
Yeah, R.K. Lee.
Okay. And you were talking about how you felt like her book was very parallel to what was going on right now. And what's funny is when all this started happening with COVID and everything, it killed me, because I had this story idea for a long time where the society became so obsessed with disease and, like, trying to, like, avoid getting disease, that they invented this, like, kind of protectant suit that you wear that was, like, almost invisible, that you wore over your entire body, and they never touched each other, and, like, all physical interaction just, like, ceased. And it was called Zero Contact. That was the name of the book that I was going to write someday. And then they'll start doing this whole, like, no contact or non-contact. And I'm like, what's going on? This was a silly idea I had just to, like, crazy future. And then I was like, oh, I should have written that like a dozen years ago. What was I thinking? Now it'll seem like I got inspiration from COVID, but I didn't. I had the idea first.
But well, and that's so I feel like that's been true about dystopian stuff for a long time. Like, I know with that interview with R.K. Lee, I had said that her to me, her book kind of was reminiscent of 1984. And so I was born in 83, and I was like, well, when I was a 1-year-old, that was not how life was, and my mom at the time, like, because I grew up with terms like Big Brother, like the concept that Big Brother's always watching you. Like, I knew what that was. I don't know if anyone ever necessarily sat down and explained it to me. I always understood what that meant, that Big Brother is always watching you. Memory hole, like, that was just part of the common vernacular, to be like, oh, okay, so suddenly we're just going to memory hold that, like it just never existed, and so, like, certain terms that came from 1984, and at the time that it was written, it was kind of a warning, and it was a warning against communism by
Orwell.
Yes, I knew that.
And it was published in 1949.
Yes, and it was against. It was warning against communism by a socialist. Funny enough, like, he had socialist mentalities, but he was like, but communism is a bridge too far. Let me show you what the world would be like if we go down this path. By 1984, this is what we'll have, right? And then 1984 came and went, and that isn't what we have. And people have a tendency to be like, oh, see, we're fine. But then the next story that comes along is like, okay, so consider this dystopia and the situation, that The Giver, right? That's one of a whole series of books, and it's not even the first one, but The Giver is a very poignant one. It became the very popular one, and it's doing the same thing. It's this world that is black and white, and you will do kind of the similar as Divergent, where it was like, you have come of age. We are going to give you this job. Also, the City of Ember, is that what is another one where she's like given a job. Her name is like Fleetfoot or something like that. I don't remember what it was.
I vaguely remember that one.
But yeah, all of these dystopian, like the world has come crashing down, and now this society of survivors are gonna like control your every element of life. And the story every time is a warning that doesn't work for humans. And then by the time like we get past that story, like we're like, oh, see, we didn't scorch the earth and have to live underground. We're fine. Okay, but also the things that they were warning us against was not necessarily nuclear disaster. It was more so like something tragic happened, and look how people manipulated that situation to gain power over us. And they did the exact same thing in that's what R.K. Lee's book is about.
And
I'm in the third one right now, and man, this is how I know I'm not an author, because I can appreciate a good story, but I couldn't. That's not in me.
I think it is. You just haven't found it yet. I think everyone has a book in them, at least one.
Maybe so. I think mine would be more along the lines of like Jane Austen than R.K. Lee, and I just don't think outside the box enough to be like, how would I get out of that situation? I would be like, I don't know, let me read Divergent and see how she got out of it. You know what I mean? Like, but anyway, that's what I feel like. I feel like Divergent is yet another of these warnings that like, no, don't let your faction be more than your family, because ultimately,
or more important than you as an individual.
Right, because ultimately that will fail you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a balance in all things, and we shouldn't be pigeonholing ourselves into one thing or another. And it's okay. And it's kind of funny. It feels like in some ways our society is trying to put too many labels on things now, where everybody has to be this or has to be that. And like, they're trying so hard to be sensitive to a small group of people that feel a certain way about something, that they're sort of alienating and persecuting everybody else, instead of being like, hey, you're going to live your life the way you're going to live it, and what's right for you, as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others, that is your business.
If
they're trying to force everybody to accept that, and like, no, you all have to accept that this is how it's going to be now, and we're going to teach this now, even though it's none of our business to teach these things to your children. That's your choice. We're taking that choice from you now, because for some reason this makes things better. Like,
that's that kind of thing. I didn't know being a mom was so hard. I get it that toddlers are obnoxious and teenagers think they need to rebel. I got all that. I didn't know society was against me, but I feel like it sometimes. But
sometimes you're like, gosh, why is this so hard?
But and I kind of I agree that the concept that like, well, and they talk about that in Divergent, like how they still call Tris a stiff, and they call Caleb a stiff, and sometimes they even call Thor a stiff because they came from abnegation. It's like, okay, but they have not only chosen but proven themselves in Dauntless. They are dauntless. They are undaunted, right?
That's why they call them that.
And yet you have decided, you have labeled them this way. You're now shoving them into that box. And against them, it's funny because like they want to be like, I want to be the best Dauntless. I want to be the smartest erudite. I want to be the most, I don't know, selfless abnegation, which sounds funny. I want to be the best at not loving myself. I don't know.
Loving
but by that same token, like, be different, be wild, get a tattoo, you know, and at the same time being divergent, being not just like everyone else is suddenly a bad thing. Your unique self is good unless it fits outside of the box we've made for you, and then super bad.
Writers, they write these things because they have a message they want to send. And they're trying to warn us against different things, or because it was this interesting, crazy idea they had. But there's usually a reason why they write what they write. But I think a lot of times people just write it off. It's just fiction. And they don't think about how the parallels into real life. And sometimes they're like blatantly obvious and you can't be like, and then other times they're super fantastical and you're like, hey, Back to the Future 2015 came and went and we don't have hover cars or hoverboards. You lied to us. Where are our flying cars? Honestly, that's what I want.
Shoes that like you put them on and they automatically size to your foot.
I want that jacket that just automatically drives.
Was it a jacket? Maybe it was a jacket.
And resized. The shoes did too. The shoes just kind of like they went on for you and like the jacket like resized. And I was like, dude, that would be amazing. Because if you gained weight, you just, resize it. Lost weight, you have like your own tailor in your own shirt.
You have one size for your waist, but a very different size for all of your pants, and hemming them ruins the style of the pants.
Yes. Amen, sister. Amen.
I think the person
who wrote girls unite.
See, this is why we just get off topic, because then it reminds me of something else that I'm like, hey, randomly. But
it's back in.
Christina is like, I'm gonna give you a makeover because in the end, they're girls, and she's like, I'm gonna give you a makeover. I'm gonna let you, feel a little more wild, or whatever it is that you like, a little more comfortable in your skin here as Dauntless, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the things that Tris like actually takes from that makeover session is a dress. It's a black dress, but she takes the dress and she's wearing the dress through part of it, and she kind of still has that like effeminate atmosphere. That's not the word I'm looking for.
Like still kind of dainty and feminine and
right. And she doesn't have to be prissy, and she doesn't have to just be like, I'm sexy now. Like, it's not over the top. It's just like, you know what? Normally I wore my full length, stiff, thick fabric of gray to disappear, and now dresses they don't have to be a bad thing, but they can be like a Dauntless dress that she was comfortable in, because it wasn't especially like revealing or anything. It just spoke to the new Tris, right?
Yeah. And
I liked that she took the moment in the book. I don't know if it's a he or a she that wrote it, actually.
It's a she. It's Veronica Roth.
Okay.
Yeah.
I probably should know that, but I didn't. But that she took that moment to be like, she talks about when she's like, at one point she's like showering and she's trying to put her pants on and she can't get her pants up over her like thighs or something, or calves maybe, because they're muscular now.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, all of the soft places about her were gone, and her body was more a strong female body now, instead of just the soft child body that she used to have. And I love that she didn't have to like become a tough dude. Like, she was still a girl that could also kick your butt. Like,
she's a strong woman. And I like that, because I feel like nowadays this whole notion that to be a strong female lead, you have to be this, and this. You can't be feminine at all. And you can't depend on a man at all. And you can't have any of the traditional values and still be a strong heroine. And it feels like it's going to the point where like almost like it's putting down all the traditional values. Like those things are all weak and stupid. And I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. A strong female character can have traditional values, can be a mother, can be a caretaker, can be a wife, right. Can be these things. And in a lot of ways, the strongest people we know, the people that that do the hardest things, are those things that people take for granted, like the mothers and the wives and the teachers and the people that they are doing the hardest things. They are the strongest. But the thing is, the strongest people don't demand to be recognized as strongest. Right. They're not looking for the recognition. They are strong because they need to be. They're strong for other people. They're not like trying to prove anything. They just are. Right. Well, and I think those are the best people, the best heroines.
I agree. I like that. Like they brought that out in Tris. Mm-hmm. Also, her mom.
Yes.
So like her mom was always just this abnegate. Like she was always there to smile and serve and whatever. And children shouldn't speak at the table, but also I'm not going to reprimand you harshly, just going to suggest maybe this is time for you to listen to father, mm-hmm. and then she's like, Mom, are you like dauntless? Like you're tough. And she's
like, what?
She's divergent. You find out when they go to attack abnegation, and she's like, babe, because you're one of us, because we are divergent. Let's do this. Let's go protect the family. Let's go protect mm-hmm. all that we can protect, Yeah. And this like seemingly subservient woman, this woman who chose to let go of her personal wants and even needs down to the most basic human survival needs. Like this person was actually the strongest personality. She was a strong person who mm-hmm. did this for her family,
Yeah.
And then as you go on through the story and you learn more about, you go, at least through the movies, I don't know the mm-hmm. books, and you learn more about her, and you continue to see that. You're like, oh, yeah, not only did she change her life for the sake of her family, but for the sake of Chicago, like she was this strong person wrapped up in a seemingly subservient like package. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's like when you think of like who's your biggest influence, there will be the people who are like Madame Curie or whatever, mm-hmm. but most of us say our moms, our grandma, my dad, like that's a lot of times the person who was there for me, that history teacher that took me aside and actually helped me understand the reasons behind the concepts he's teaching. Like, mm-hmm. Those are the people that you remember and that you look up to. In contrast, no one's looking up to Janine, right? She fought and struggled and gained power, and she was going to change the world, and she was going to make everyone correct. And she seemed to have genuinely, she like drank her own Kool-Aid and fully believed that she's doing this for the good of people. I'm going to murder you for the good of other people. Like that's.
Yes, she does genuinely seem like she thinks this is a legitimate thing to do.
Right.
Like not just because she just wants to kill people, but she really does buy that doing this is somehow going to give peace to everyone.
Right. She will do anything for power because she legitimately thinks she is better for
everyone,
the people as a whole. Yeah. Instead of the people who actually lead lives that matter to other people. And I feel like 4 represents that very well. Tris represents that really well. Her mother represents that really well. And the contrast that they put between like, who's the real hero? Tris is the easy one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her mom is an easy one to see, you know. 4 is an easy hero. I kind of feel like Christina and Will they're clearly the side characters of this story.
Yeah.
But they're heroes. Like they, in their own way. Like I was saying that to my husband when I was watching it, and he was kind of sort of present, and he was like, he tried to kill Tris. I'm like, right, because he was not divergent, and they put a chemical into his body specifically designed to alter his brain chemistry,
to make him do things he would never have done. Yeah.
And the person that he was, the fact that it hurt her. If it was just some dauntless person, she'd be like, oh, I hate that I have to kill, but I have to, he's shooting at me, right?
Yeah.
But Will was that good person that
good friend
broke her. And later on, even in like the third movie, like she is broken from that carries with her for a long time.
Yeah. What's also her best girlfriend's man. It's a man she loves. Right. And that's another level of guilt, because it's not just guilt for her, but guilt for Christina, because that's an irreplaceable person. And I think that was one of her fears, was having to kill somebody.
Right. And it was her family, and then
to have to kill somebody that mattered to her. That was one of her fears. So yeah.
So yeah, just kind of that dichotomy between like the real heroes and the people who thought they were doing what it took to be the hero. Like Beatrice doesn't want to be a hero. 4, he specifically like passes up authority a couple of times because he doesn't want to be the hero, right?
He'd rather be teaching people and helping people, because that comes from his abnegation background. He'd rather be teaching other people and helping them be more successful in their transition into darkness than to be all in charge and be the tough guy.
Right. And I kind of like that. They talk about how abnegation runs the government because they are selfless.
Because they
are not seeking power. They are the ones who are giving the food to the homeless, to the factionless. They are the ones who are setting up the city project, rebuilding the city, right? That's why they are the ones who are the leaders, because they're not doing it for themselves, and they're not doing it for their faction, and they're not even doing it for their family. They are legitimately doing it for the overall good of Chicago. But kind of that concept that if you seek it, they talk about that in the Sorcerer's Stone, going all the way back to our first one. The only person who could get the Sorcerer's Stone, right, was the person who wanted it, but not to use it.
Yeah.
And there's kind of that concept generally that like Janine wanted the power because she thought she
deserved it,
use it better. Yeah.
She was smarter than everyone else, and she knew better than everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is one of those other, that also is the message that I'm like, does everyone else see what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
I feel like it's not a hard message to get, but
I agree. I feel like this also really brings home the point, the concept that don't give away freedom for the illusion of safety, because that's what they're essentially doing. Like, because they're told this is going to keep the peace, they allow themselves to be separated from their families and put into these factions. And that, because I'm like this and my family's like that, I can't be with my family anymore. Instead of being able to be their own people, but because they're told that, this is going to make you safe. And that is exactly what is going on now. We're being told, if you do this and do this, it's going to keep you safe. But meanwhile, it's destroying jobs, and it's dividing families, and it's causing all these extra problems. And they shut down the country, and all this ridiculous crap that we're still feeling the effects of now. And it's been going on for years now, because they said, but this will, if you give up your freedom and do these things we're saying you have to do, you'll be safe.
Right.
Well, it was a load of crap, and we were not safe. It only made things worse.
Right. You'll be safe and you'll be happy. This is the way that you will live your best life. And that's a theme in the Divergent. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something that is going on right now. There are a few phrases that I say all the time. My kids are probably so sick of them. Like, for Mother's Day, when they're like, how old is your mom? And they're like 12. And you're like, yes.
Yes, right. Yes. You trained your children well.
But and they'll say like, what's something mommy always says? And they're going for like, I love you, or whatever, you're my treasure, or whatever. And my kids, like, some of the things they say is like, give people a little grace, right? That's something that I say a lot. And another one that I often say is, don't let your virtue become your vice. And I've had to explain it several times, but I kind of feel like that's what it is. Like, Janine's virtue, but it seems that she genuinely thinks that she can make a perfect society, a more complete society.
Yeah.
By taking out the people who don't fit within her parameters of a perfect society, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And her virtue, wanting to improve society, became her vice. And Al's virtue of wanting to be better, he chose the protector, right? The protector role. That's why Al, that's why he joined Dauntless, to protect. And ultimately, he let his virtue of wanting to belong in the protector group become his vice of...
He turned on someone he cared for.
Yeah.
So he could obtain it.
I mean, she had rejected him. She had become better than him, and...
Yeah, that's right. Wasn't there a little bit of an interest for Al in the book? Like, he was kind of interested in her and she wasn't. So there was like another level of betrayal there.
Yeah. And also the Will and Christina relationship, they don't even address that in the first movie. They don't even, like, you don't understand that Christina and Will are a couple in the movie. I never got that. And then when I was watching the other movies, like, all of a sudden she's like, I can't tell Christina. And I'm like, okay. But then in the book, you see them kind of flirting and kind of,
you get a sense that there was more going on there. Yeah. It was a deeper relationship than...
Right. Well, and then right before everything falls out, right before the serum kicks in that makes them all go attack Abnegation, she's like, oh my gosh, Will kissed me. Like, it's happening, Mm-hmm. And so then when she, the next morning, has to kill Will, like, yeah, of course that tore her up, Whereas in the movie, like, he was just a friend. Like, I legitimately was like, the movies would almost make it appear that she was like, sorry, Christina, I killed him and he was our friend, but I won't kill you. Like, that must have been what was so upsetting to her, because in the movie, they don't even address that there's a relationship there. They don't even address that.
They hint at it, but not like super strong. But they don't, they totally ignored the whole Al being into her thing.
Right.
That
he just went from being one of the friend group to being there when Peter's group attacks Tris.
Yeah, being a part of that. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, why? And then they're just pulling his body out, and you don't really get, like, in the book, Eric makes that whole speech about how, he is he was a dauntless and whatever, blah blah blah, and I forget what he says, but let's all remember and cherish him and keep him in our thoughts, and he's a true, I don't know if he says hero, but he like has all of these like words of praise for Albert, even though we all know he didn't really care for the kid. And she is upset because she feels like she drove him to it.
Yeah.
And also, she's specifically upset that Eric would be sitting here saying all these things, first of all, about someone that he doesn't legitimately care about.
Yes.
And second of all, almost making it sound like maybe you should consider suicide too. What a hero. Like, you know what I mean? Like that was so grating to her soul. And again, the movie, like, I feel like they were kind of like, we're gonna hit this and this and this.
Hit the highlights.
Yeah. And they just, one more example of, they kind of depersonalized it to me.
Yeah.
And I know that you can't put everything in. You can't put every little sideways glance and, smile as you turn away. Like, I get it. You can't always.
You can. It'll just turn to a 6-hour movie, like the Annie Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that it's not quite as personal and it's not quite as deep as the book itself. I do think that overall it's successful as a movie. It's a good movie. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's engaging. I do feel like this time watching it, all the crazy things that the Dauntless did just felt like, obviously this is a teen novel where, everybody jumps off the train and they're all like, it feels like you only ever see, or you rarely ever see any of the adult Dauntless. You see mostly just teenage Dauntless, which is, again, a classic teenage novel where almost everybody is a teenager and there's very few adults in the story. And like, there just seems something very written about them, like, oh, everyone else is already waiting for the test, the aptitude test, but these guys will come in at the very last minute and jump off the train and come, like, it's like, nobody walks, like is it illegal? Like, nobody can just walk or just get off the train?
What made me laugh for some reason was when they started all like parkouring and climbing up the building.
I know, you're like, so they're not afraid of falling and dying? Like, no one's like, guys, that's a bad idea. I mean, it's one thing to be like fearless, it's another thing to be stupid.
It served no purpose. That was kind of the thing that grabbed me. Like how they're running. Okay, that makes sense. And then the child, her, is also running, right? And then they just start like, woo, climbing up.
They're monkeys. They're just climbing stuff. And it's like,
and you're like, but why? Like, I get it. Running, that serves a purpose. And riding the train, okay. Like, I get it. That they ride the train, they can get there quickly, and they are dauntless. So it's not like the train has to stop and they disembark. They're just gonna, the train slows down and they're just gonna hop off.
They make it seem almost like the train doesn't stop, like it's incapable of stopping. It's just a train that keeps going around all the time. And
I kind of wonder if that was the point, because in the book it does too. Like in the book, they're like, oh, the train's gonna be here in a minute. If you miss it, you'll have to wait 12 minutes or whatever for the next one. So I kind of wonder if that was like supposed to be a thing. They seemed unnecessarily wild. They seemed unnecessarily like, we all get tattoos and wear crazy clothes. Yeah, man.
One thing I wanted to bring up real quick is I do feel like the guy that played Eric, I feel like he did a pretty good job of portraying that character. Yes, you get so much more of Eric in the book, but I still felt like I got a sense that this was that guy.
I feel like he's another character that they kind of took away from the character's personal elements. And when she does her test, and it's kind of in the movie, it's everybody, it's like screens watching all around, and she's right there in the room and they can all see what's going on.
Yeah.
In the book, there's the people that can see the screens that are like showing her heart rate and stuff, and then the only people who actually see her fearscape are the Dauntless leaders, including Eric. And so when she has the one where she's like scared of the intimate relationship with Four, like Four even comes in afterwards and he's like, so why were they laughing at your fearscape? Like, and she's like, oh, intimacy.
You try to rape me in my fear escape?
Because I had to push a very avarice you off of me, and Eric was laughing at it, and but one of those things that that makes Eric more human, more of a person, and kind of gives him a little bit of a purpose maybe behind the way that he treats her or both of them or whatever. That again, they just decided, it seems like everything that they pulled out was all of the person parts of the book.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem. You kind of get lost in translation when you transfer things, adapt things from one medium to the next. And, it is what it is, But yeah, I think we've covered everything. But yeah, I'm mad that they gave a tall girl a short girl's part. That's what I'm going to say. So it's your turn to pick a book. Have you thought about something? Do you know what you want to do next time?
I've got a couple of them. I think I'm going to go completely different direction.
Okay.
And do Ella Enchanted.
Okay, I haven't read that one.
It's my sister Heather. It's one of her very favorite books from our youth. And I've never read it either. So I know she has some opinions, and we will see if I share those opinions.
I have seen the movie. I remember the movie. There were things I really liked about it. So yeah. All right, that sounds fun. So yeah, so next time we'll do Ella Enchanted. And yes, this was our conversation about Divergent. I hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time on Paperback Flicks. Bye.